Okay, good. There we go. We've made it in. I still always think it's funny that it rings the doorbell to let me know that I'm in my own channel. There's a little charm to it, I suppose. So we're getting up right now and we should be set in just a second. So any of the people that you shared the link with, or if anybody's watching right now as we're coming in and you want to share the link, you are able to do that and people can come watch and discuss and learn with us right away. So welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet. And it has been a week of just incredible information on this channel. And we've enjoyed having Stephen Forrest over. We had Rick Levine about a week ago, and he'll be back. Brian Coulter will be here. But today we have Maurice Fernandez, who I went out, you guys, and I asked people to work with me. So if you're wondering how to connect with astrologers or people in other industries, sometimes you just have to ask and people will be willing to come to the table. So Maurice, thank you so much for being willing to be here with us today.
Thank you very much for setting it up and looking forward to connecting with people.
Yes, this is going to be exciting, especially because we're kind of, we came out of nowhere together. So this is an intro for us as well, which I think is very nice to do that live and on camera here. But there's a lot of information I think that you can offer this community. People here want to grow, they want to learn, and I think you know a fair bit about how to help people do that. So let's talk about some of that information. You are teaching on your own. You've got your own programs, and then we can talk about associations and stuff. So do you want to tell us a bit about who you are and how you teach and what you teach?
Yes, thank you very much. Basically, my approach is based on evolutionary astrology, and that is about using the chart from a spiritual point of view, understanding the soul journey. And this is a wonderful perspective because it helps us not only understand what this life is about, why am I here, but also get to the practical details, whether it's job related questions or relationships, everything people naturally go through. So there are different options for those who do want to take astrology more seriously. This is a very deep program. I think it's transformative for the students as well. It's your own journey of learning. And you can, enroll in just one workshop or do the whole program. It's really up to you. And of course, you can check my books and see if this resonates with you. That's kind of if you appreciate this language. So I have one book on Neptune and the 12th house, and I have another book for the sun and the moon. It's called Astrology Fundamentals. So just go to the website, you'll have all the information there.
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned, I'm part of OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology. I was president for 6 years until last week. So I'm very much believe in what we're doing there. And don't let the title intimidate you. It's not only for professionals, but it really is about elevating the standards to a professional level. So members basically have access to many free lectures that happen online, and we have a Facebook page with a lot of interactions and study. And each quarter we have a 80-page magazine coming out, as well as panels online. So it's really a buzzing organization if you want to be part of a community and make astrology, help astrology grow for yourself and for the community. And we also have, satellites in different parts of the world, UK and Canada and Greece and South Africa. So it's fun. Check
Yeah,
it out.
Absolutely. And I know that one of the things that happens with clients that I work with often enough is they'll say, I'm just getting into astrology and I feel like I don't know how to find my tribe or where to find support. And I'm trying to tell my spouse about all of these magical astrology things and they just can't relate. And sometimes the organizations, the associations are wonderful places to go to begin to speak the language of astrology with people who can relate with you right there as well. And that is something that was really important to me, to stop holding my family hostage when they didn't understand, what I was talking about quite yet, and instead to have supportive peers and people who could elevate me as well and show me how to do this in a different way than I was doing it. So I'm appreciative of associations for sure.
I think it's really important because it centralizes all our efforts. So you can do whatever astrology you like, whether it's traditional, whether it's spiritual. And we, this umbrella really is very inclusive. But then you get to meet other people, like you say. We, as astrologers, we're often isolated and people don't speak our language, and there's obviously a lot of prejudice. And we often also educate people about how to address some of the criticism against astrology.
Yeah.
So it's a rich experience.
So before we move on from this particular topic, in order to be a part of OPA, what do you have to do? What do you have to join and to be a part of this?
So you just go to the website, which is, as it lists here, opaastrology.org. And first of all, check it out, browse through the website, see what's available. And then there's a section that says, why join? And you can see some of the perks and you will see a link to sign up. So it's $60 per year. And like we say, you get access to all these things, the magazine and the people and the online workshops. And we also have occasionally on location retreats. We're supposed to have one in April, but it was in Zion in Utah in the mountains. So we were supposed to be out and look at the stars together and have speakers and have this amazing experience. But we had to migrate online because of what happened this year. So we had this whole event online, and it was wonderful, but obviously no mountains.
No laying on our back looking at the stars together, huh?
Nope.
No.
Next time.
So if you're thinking about it or you're beginning to look around for places to gather support and to advance yourself, $60 for a year is a phenomenal investment to have access to things that are very streamlined presentations with some pretty amazing speakers who can help open your mind or help round off some of your sharp edges maybe that you have out there. So if you're looking for something, these are great places to look. OPA is a great place. Studying with Maurice, if you are looking for evolutionary astrology or looking to branch out and find out more about what that's about, those are great options. And I will make sure that both of those links are in the description box down below. So what we're actually talking about today are great cycles in astrology. So I'm excited to see what you have to say. Oh, and look, it's beautiful already. I knew this was going to be good. Venus
Well,
and the sun. Man, we've had some beautiful experience. We're only, what is it, just yesterday, huh?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought it would be a good thing to speak about the Venus cycle because it's current, it's happening right now, really. And we will also speak about some of the Jupiter cycles because this year and until 2022, there's really a lineup of really great, important cycles with Jupiter. So let's start with Venus because it's happening as we speak. You can see basically in this chart, those of you who can read a chart and understand the symbols, this is Venus and the sun is the circle and the point. And they came together at the same degree in Gemini yesterday, June 3rd, 2020. And why is that important? Well, to begin with, think about Venus represents appreciation, represents resources, and our sense of satisfaction in life. So when we look at Venus in a chart, we can see what the person really gravitates towards and what they're good at. It is also representing our ability to connect with others and form relationships. So the sun represents the life force, really what makes you wake up every morning. And what I mean by that is, do you want to wake up every morning? Do you have something to look forward to? And we can ask, do you have a life? That's the sun. So the sun is that powerful energy that is really about what you are doing with your life. And both of these planets represent the force of love. Venus is about appreciation and it's about wanting to connect with others and also self-love. Whereas the sun is the love for life. It's your passion to exist. And what this means, and when I said, do you want to wake up every morning? What makes you motivated to live, to keep the flame burning? I'm asking you, Stormie, why are you having all these online workshops? It wouldn't be easier to just not do anything, to just lay down? Why do we go through the troubles of starting new projects and taking on new responsibilities and investing our time, our energy, our money into all kinds of things? Because we have love. There's deep down, there's a desire to create and to give. And so the more we are active with our sun, the more we basically give back to life. And that's a thing, is to give back, because we receive a lot from life.
Agreed.
Light, oxygen, nature. We didn't do any of that. It was just given to us. So the sun is, how do you contribute back? And when they come together, Venus and the sun, it's this portal of an opportunity to really, build bridges and find out what you want to do with your life and ignite your passion again. Now, this happens as Venus is now in retrograde and it's in the sign of Gemini. And it's very timely because we know what's going on in the world. Not only, we had this global health crisis, but there's a general feeling of division, of polarization. And then the whole George Floyd events, that, incredibly brutal situation where this person lost his life for nothing. Talk about the sun, and talk about the, wanting to exist and wanting to wake up every morning, and then for the most absurd reason, somebody takes that away from you. And it's, this aspect of racism and social rights is very important. If we look at the Venus cycle with the sun, and we see that in the midst of anger and protest and the need for change, there's a window of understanding. There's a window where we can build bridges. And because it's in the sign of Gemini this time, it also speaks about bridging cultures,
Mhm.
listening. You know, it's an air sign, it's a mental sign. So it has a lot to do with better understanding, with good conversations, with talking to each other. And it's interesting that just yesterday, as this was happening, you know, Donald Trump wanted to deploy the army to, you know, to curb the protest and to overpower them. And he kept advocating for um, using more force and being more radical. And the Pentagon uh, leader, you know, who's basically in charge of the army, said no, it's not warranted for. You know, we don't need to go that far. And there's been a lot of back and forth around that, but just that aspect of, you know, let's gain proportion. Let's see what's really happening here. Let's listen
Listen.
and try to try to build bridges rather than, you know, chasms. Now,
Mm.
what you see in the center is this incredible pattern that Venus creates as she meets the sun in different places in the zodiac. It's called a five petal flower or a five pointed star. And in the space of 8 years, Venus keeps meeting the sun pretty much at the same points over and over again. And this is the pattern that she creates. So now is June 3rd. You see, this is the sign of Gemini, and you see the green numbers is when it happens, is you know, the starting of the process. So from June 3rd, the green star is the when Venus is retrograde. It's going to go next to Capricorn on January 8th, 2022. That's going to be another meeting between the Sun and Venus. And then from there, it's going to go to Leo on August 13, 2023. Then early Aries, March 22, 2025. And then early Scorpio, end of Libra in 26. And then back to Gemini, almost to the same point, just 2-degree difference in 2028. So 8-year cycle. And there's a whole other dance like that with the red stars, where Venus meets the sun when she's going direct on these same points. So there are two stars really.
Sure.
And think of the beautiful symmetry. If Venus speaks about beauty and speaks about, you know, the senses and appreciation, you see the pattern that she creates, this beautiful 5-petal flower in the sky. That's actually how it looks if you were to trace her path with the sun. And we, you know, we, like we say, we invoke the heart center when they come together.
Mm. So here in the energy of Gemini, certainly with Venus retrograde, the going back to hearing all sorts of voices and thinking and thoughts and ideas return to us. And we get to see that play out. And personally, in our individual lives, it's always interesting to see how this manifests and what we've gone back to bring forward, almost like a pulling forward. I know something that happened for me as I remembered, 15 years ago, my parents taught me about herbs and taught me about medicine. And I was standing in the kitchen and I was like, oh, wait, I know how to do that. I have this information. It's always been here. So we see these things come out, new reasons to get up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. What a beautiful expression of that.
Yes. And we know also, those of you who kind of follow astrology, that tomorrow on Friday, June the 5th, is a very important eclipse.
Mhm.
that is going, when, you know, the moon is going to move from Scorpio to Sagittarius. It's already in Sagittarius, but it's going to align exactly opposite the sun. And that's a full moon, sun moon opposition.
Sure.
But the fact that it's close to the what we call the nodes creates the eclipse effect. But what's particular about this eclipse is that it's going to be at 15 Gemini Sagittarius, and it's going to square the planet Mars exactly at 15
Yeah.
Pisces. So Mars is a challenger, and it's kind of the opposite of Venus. So Venus is a very unifying factor, the Sun Venus, and then we move on Friday to a point where there could be a lot of agitation
Mhm.
and even anger. But we understand that there's a purpose for change. Now, I don't know if you notice it, but pay attention. In the course of this month, the whole month of June, we have two eclipses because they always come in pairs, solar and lunar. And when it's that time when these eclipses come, it seems like things happen very quickly,
Mhm.
very accelerated. Suddenly, changes occur that can change your life from one day to the next. You know, you can get a job in Japan and they're telling you, you know, pack up and go, it's happening. Or you're selling your house, or, you know, it can be good news, and it can be also your partner telling you it's over. So it's when eclipses occur, it seems like there's some kind of higher intervention, something that is not in our control, that creates very rapid development and rapid change. And it's as if the gates of heaven open, because what is an eclipse? It's an alignment of the sun, the earth, and the moon in perfect alignment. And so it's like opening, you know, a safe.
Mhm.
And the gate open for that period of time, and you get all this download and these changes. And then when it's over, you kind of ask yourself, what the hell happened here? You know, where were we? So this is June. Pay attention. Let's see how it affects you personally, and how you can also use this energy to accelerate development in your life.
Absolutely, especially because that T square that's available there is a perfect point for emotions to quickly get hot and broiled with Mars there. But having the brilliance of Venus a part of the square can also stimulate us into or motivate us into action to behave differently, to take it to a different place within our relationships. And that's not just limited, I think, to our homes, but in society, as we're getting things done, how do we bring something else? How do we refocus that energy into what's going to be most effective? I think is a beautiful piece of the opposition of this moon and with those squares in there.
Agreed. And I think that, you know, it's a moment of intensity, but it's also a moment of realization.
Mhm.
And because it's in Gemini Sagittarius, it affects the higher mind, the need to understand. It also activates issues around culture, race, and uh, ideologies, belief systems.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity for a dialogue. But the worst case scenario is indeed a feeling with Mars in Pisces, a feeling of victimization.
Yeah.
And when I feel victimized, then I can justify
Mhm.
hurting people. And so it's important to overcome that and to choose the higher road, so to speak. So everyone, if we look at, um, the people who've caused a lot of pain in their lives, they always come with a justification. I was abused and my parent did that, and the mean people hurt me, and you create basically all kinds of justifications, not really looking at the big picture. And that's a dangerous place to be. So on the one hand, we have to acknowledge our wounds. If someone hurts us, we're not just going to say nothing happened and we're all good. We need to address that, but at the same time, we shouldn't use that as leverage. And so with Mars in Pisces, look at your life and see where you can feel overwhelmed, where you can also sometimes feel disempowered, and use dialogue, use knowledge, to empower yourself, to grow and open new doors.
Absolutely. And I think that is really, I think it's a good time for us in the global cultural conversation right now as well, because while things are changing and systems are changing and um, coming into something else, we can come into something else. But if we as individuals are not also taking responsibility from shifting from the victim position to actually taking responsibility, all of the change on the planet can come and we won't be ready to step up to it. So I think this is a phenomenal time where even as individuals, we get to look at what was not actually taken from me, where am I not actually the victim, and I am available to step up now, or I'm available to respond differently now. It doesn't mean things from the past haven't been done, but it is a step into a current reality, I think, where we get to use the energies to bring ourselves and others along.
Absolutely. And we always have to remember, we're going to learn those lessons. Our choice is, are we learning the hard way or are we learning the more progressive way?
Yeah.
Because we can see challenges, we look at the ephemeris, we look at the star alignment, we can go, oh my God, especially in 2020, this is kind of the year where the universe is really having some kind of, you know, very intense scenario for us, all packed in one year. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be destructive. It can definitely be, like you say, the change of systems in a way that helps us take the higher road and build a better world.
Yeah. I think we'll actually get to see, the second part of the year. I think we'll see many, many more people ready from the shocks of these systems and these little portals to awakening coming along, um, ready to step up into their own next existence. And there's also something with all of the energies in Gemini and Sagittarius that makes information that maybe seemed like it was not available before accessible and available. So we kind of, all of us in whatever way, come just out of the veil of ignorance, because ignorance means it was there, I just couldn't see it, right? And so then we have access to power, to information, to teachers, to resources that we didn't know we could access before. And that changes things, that changes people, that changes communities, I think.
And you can look, if you know your chart, you can look where that Gemini degree 13 Gemini lands in your chart to see what area of your life is going to be activated. If it's in the second house, it has to do with resources. So that can be a good time to receive and to give, to have an exchange, to get a good pay and to increase your salary. If it's in the fifth house, it may have to do with your kids, you know, uh, wanting to start a new project, or maybe you're going to get pregnant. Who knows? So that's also personalize it by placing it in your chart.
Yeah, mine is definitely, it's at the top of my chart, tip top of my chart there.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be plenty busy, I'm sure.
Okay.
All right.
And so looking at other cycles, I wanted to explore other, important alignment that are current. And the first one is Jupiter Saturn conjunction. Jupiter and Saturn are the two largest planets of the solar system. And, when they come together, it's always a big deal. And the next time that's going to happen is in December 2020. More precisely, it's going to be December 21st. So it's right on the solstice point.
Mm.
And I'm going to touch on that. I just want to go through all the others as well. The, the bottom one, Jupiter Pluto, is already happening.
Yeah.
The first meeting was 1st of April, and they're going to meet 3 times this year at 23 degrees ish Capricorn.
So we're on the way to that this month.
Yes, the next meeting is going to be June 30th.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I also wanted to explore Jupiter and Neptune, because even though it's not happening this year, it's still a super important cycle, and it is building up to conjunct in 2022. And the interesting thing is that Jupiter and Neptune are both the rulers of the sign of Pisces. Neptune is the modern ruler because it was discovered quite recently in the 19th century. And Jupiter before that was the ruler of Pisces. And the interesting thing is that these are the next meeting will be in Pisces. So they're going to both meet in their own sign of Pisces, 23 Pisces, in April 2022. So that's going to be a big activation as well.
Sure.
But let's start with Jupiter Saturn.
The great conjunction.
Now, yeah, it's a great conjunction. It's the great conjunction. And the reason is that, as I said, both Jupiter and Saturn are the largest planets, and they are the last visible planets. And they represent, in the chart, they represent social order. They represent the wisdom of the elders.
Mm-hmm.
Both Jupiter and Saturn have to do with law, order, wisdom. So they are basically representing the force that guide us. They are the big guides, and they condition us to know right from wrong, to know what does it mean to be happy, what does it mean to be successful, what do you compare it to, and how do you know that killing people is the wrong thing to do? Like, who told you that? That's the reference of Jupiter and Saturn. It brings some kind of higher guidance. It's the astrology Bible. Was written by Jupiter and Saturn, and this is why they are so important when they come together. They create a new order, a new leader. In the mythology, Saturn was Jupiter's father. And not only, were they related, but they also represent different worlds, because Saturn was a titan and Jupiter is considered a god. Now, this seems like just words, but there's something meaningful in in that new generation. If you look at Jupiter as an astrology, Jupiter represents expansion and adventure, the need to find out the truth. You know, what is the meaning of my life? Why am I here? And so you see the symbol of Sagittarius that's ruled by Jupiter. That's this wild horse with a human body, you know, aiming at new horizons. So there's something very expansive, and it's really about stretching how far you can go as a person. But it is also about stretching to the spiritual world, not just the material world. So Jupiter is our access to something that is higher than ourselves. And so what you do is you basically, you know, fill up, you inhale, and you take in life. And Jupiter, in that sense, has to do with free will. What do I want to do with my life? How far can I go? And I want a bigger mansion, and I want to become an astrologer, and I want to date this person. And it's all these things that you can do if you put your mind to it, and if you are also open to that expansive quality. It's making your life better, higher, deeper, wider. Whereas Saturn represents the world of Titans. And Titans lived in a very peaceful world. Why did they live in a peaceful world? Because there was no free will. And so everything was in the right place. And everybody said the right thing. Because that's the only thing you knew, and that's the only thing you could say. So Saturn brings that higher order that you can question. You can't just, you know, say, no, I don't want to do that. It is about what is fated, what is higher than your ego. And so that mutation between Saturn and Jupiter has to do between the fusion of fate and free will. Now, when I speak about free will and Jupiter, it's more adventurous, but it's also more risky.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have free will, it means you can make mistakes. When there's no free will, there's no mistake. And that's why there was so, you know, Saturn was about this era of peace. But at the same time, as we understand it, the role of Jupiter was to provide the free will so that we become also active participants, that we start to have our own conscience and start to think independently. So that dance between them often creates, new development in society. They are going to meet in December, which is going to be, really right before Christmas on the solstice point, which is very, very powerful. Now, what's so interesting is that this time they also meet in the sign of Aquarius. And it's a big deal because all the previous years, for 200 years, they meet every 20 years. So now it's 2020. The last time they met was 2000, then 1980 and 60 and 40 and 20. And in all these times, for the past 200 years, they met in in an earth sign, except for 1980. And now they are starting a 200-year cycle in air signs. So not only are we having a new conjunction of these guides and leaders and giants, but it's also happening on a radically new path. So the level of transformation is is really significant. You know, we can really anticipate some kind of paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And I trust that many structures will be redefined by new leaders because of that. So it may be that in your own life, you know, like for example, a Jupiter Saturn year is a year when you change leaders. Like what I said, I was for 6 years I was president. Now is a time for something else. And you may say, well, it hasn't happened yet. It's in 6 months, but they're already very close to each other.
Yeah.
So
They're
it's
not
already in
too far.
process.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see that kind of change of guard in many different areas of society and of our own personal life. We're going to see children leaving home and a new generation coming. There's going to be all kinds of replacement and the spinning of the wheel, so to speak. So try to see, of course, where is 0 degrees Aquarius in your chart, because that's where you can have a completely new development in your life. Now, if you want to kind of have an idea, um, look back 20 years. What happened to you in the year 2000? For me, that was the first time that I lectured internationally. I was invited to the United States to speak at an astrology conference. And that set the tone for my career and my move to the United States. I moved to the United States 2 years later, published a book. You know, one thing led to another. So that was kind of a seeding point. And that happened in Taurus at the time. And Taurus is in my 11th house. So it has to do with astrology and higher knowledge and organizations. And I often ask people what happened to you in year 2000, and they're going to say, "Oh, that's the year I divorced, and that's the year, I became a parent." It seems like that was a pivotal year for many people.
Yeah. I was starting college.
And what did you study?
I started with foreign languages.
Hmm.
Yeah. So everything that has to do with talking, that's continued on so far.
And here we are on a YouTube channel.
And here we are. Yes, 3 years, just 3 years later, I ended up being a radio DJ.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. So it's all come together as I continue to watch these energies unfold, especially with the astrology.
Absolutely, because you will look at the conjunction, but then they're going to sextile each other and square each other and oppose each other. So it's like the hands of the clock. Jupiter moves faster, and it creates a full cycle around Saturn until they meet again 20 years later. And that's going to be, I believe, in the sign of Libra, if I'm not mistaken, in 2040. So right now, basically, as we speak and into early 2021, we are remodeling our lives, restructuring our lives. It seems like the iron's hot and you're bending it in a different shape, and then it's going to cool down again, and that's going to be your life for the next cycle.
Yeah, and brilliantly, it seems like the energies, the universe is kind. So we have this space where the something else gets to die off, but in that death, in the decomposition of it, it is deliciously fertile ground to grow what's next. We're not left without. Um, in any of these cycles. There's always the place. And in the energy of air, just like when we look back to the 80s, the ability to access and share thought and information and ideas is abundantly big at this time. So when I look at it, everybody's right on time and their new ideas have been in that dirt formulating. And as we move towards December and it comes about and then we watch it unfold, it'll be interesting to see what old issues have had to come out for people to deal with in order to keep that ground healthy and develop it as we move forward.
And think about the fact that it's also in Aquarius,
Yeah.
which is for us important because it's the sign that relates to astrology.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. So this is why many of us anticipate that astrology is going to gain more visibility. It's going to gain greater influence in the collective because if the two guides happen to connect in the sign that's related to astrology, maybe astrology will, will serve as a better reference for the 20 years to come. And we see how helpful astrology was to understand the year 2020 and all these, unexpected occurrences.
Yeah. Well, and there is, I think even we were just talking about this at Norwalk, or it came up and has probably been presented, but this is my first year at Norwalk, this idea that different cultures, different ethnicities seem to be absent from some of the conferences and things like that. And I think that is an interesting point to bring up in the heat of everything we're experiencing now, because more than making it just accessible to people, the other thing I think happens is, again, people step up and say, I want to be a part of this. I've wanted to be a part of it. So there's an action to move towards it. And the other piece of that, I think, is that we realize some things were never kept from people, just how to get there, how to be involved. The energy of Aquarius stepping in March gave us a new tool immediately. And astrologers have been expecting the arrival of new students and teachers, I think, for decades. And that's the beauty of the generosity that I think Jupiter and Saturn will show. Even as we finish this year, but certainly as we move through 2021, people will be invited to the table to eat and to share and to teach.
Absolutely. And that's why I encourage people to, and that's part of our work with OPA and my work as a teacher in my own practice, is to understand that astrology is going to be an important service for the future. And we encourage people to get better, to deepen their understanding, because as astrology gains more visibility, it's also going to gain more criticism,
Yeah.
more scrutiny. You're going to have people, it's going to rub people the wrong way. And we need to really know our stuff.
Mhm.
It's a test for us to get better. The way we work with OPA is also to incorporate astronomy for astrologers programs
Yeah.
and to
Gemini bread.
bring science into it so that people understand what's happening. We also have programs that train people not just to study astrology but to do consulting skills and peer group review, because it's not enough to know astrology. You need to know how to deliver it. You need to know how to counsel people, how to consult with them. And that's not something you read in astrology books. So that's where also astrology organizations are important, because we pay attention to the ethics, we pay attention to the compassion, the human factor that needs to be addressed and incorporated.
Mhm. We
And
start to
that's
have a
that's
system. We're
yeah, and
in the United States, we're ungoverned, we're kind of out here. So I do think it's interesting as well to see Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, where we have the mix of the people, the social energies coming together saying, let's take this to the highest good. Let's be serious about this energy. Seriousness meets wisdom and make it the best that it can be. So if you're looking to be in this field, these will be the places.
And this is the time.
This is the time.
It's really it's an auspicious time to join this movement. And regardless, beyond astrology, just invoke the wisdom of your ancestors, the wisdom of the elders,
Mm,
and the wisdom of the new generation. Because the beautiful thing also about Jupiter and Saturn is old versus new.
mm-hmm.
It's expansion and contraction, it's the breath. So just meditate on this symbol and just see that there's going to be an opportunity for you to actually create the framework for the life you'd like to have for the next 20 years. Not all of it is up to you. We speak about fate and free will, but at least you can put your intentions on the table. And so this brings us to the next cycle, I believe, Pluto.
Pluto and Jupiter.
So today, this year they're dancing together. They're actually Saturn, Jupiter, and then Pluto's nearby. And they're going to meet each other at different times. So Jupiter and Pluto have met in April, and again this month on the 30th, and again in November. And Pluto and Saturn have met in January, and then Jupiter, Saturn at the last one. So it's basically a triple conjunction, really, that happens this year as they keep dancing with each other.
Yeah.
And Jupiter Pluto is a different direction, really. Pluto is a tiny, tiny planet. It's actually now referred to as a dwarf planet.
Dwarf planet. I have a whole shirt about this.
Yeah.
I made a shirt that Pluto's still a planet. I just am very excited about that planet.
Well, I live in Arizona, close to where it was discovered in 1930, in the Lowell Observatory. So they have a whole Pluto culture there, and more T-shirts, and they have a place where you can put $1 if in the category if you want Pluto to stay dwarf planet or if you want it to be a real planet.
So when I show up with my entire penny jar, no one will be shocked.
Exactly. So Pluto is also at the edge of the solar system, at least, up to recently. We've discovered many new other dwarf planets, such as Eris and Makemake and Haumea. But it's pretty far away from the sun. It's really on the edge of the solar system. And it's the tiniest body, really, whereas Jupiter is the largest. It's this gas giant, and it is a physical giant. So we have a giant and a dwarf.
These stories are always interesting.
Yeah, there's always some myth. What is common to Jupiter and Pluto? They're very different in size, and they're very different in the way they work. But they're both growth oriented. Both of them rule signs, whether it's Scorpio or Sagittarius, that want more. Scorpio is let's evolve, let's grow, let's shed the skin. There's more to life, like dig. Nothing is what it seems. So there's an appetite for constant growth. And Jupiter is like, no, I'm not settling for this. I want the universe. I want it all.
Yeah.
So as they come together, they can stimulate that tremendous force of development and growth. Now, it seems so weird because it's actually a time where everything's shrinking. and we had the coronavirus and nobody could work and we had to stay at home. And it was kind of anticlimactic to that. But the truth is that when I counsel clients under this transit, I see that even though people had to retreat during the lockdown, many people, really were looking for wanting to change their circumstances. The fact that they stayed home, they had time to think, they had time to also feel that we don't have time to waste. Look, the world is in chaos. If I don't do things now, when will I? And so many of the conversation we ended up having with client was, I don't want to go back to this work. I don't want to go back to normal. I want something different.
Yeah.
And that's part of that Jupiter Pluto is, let's break the mold. It's too small for me now at this point. I've grown, I'm a different person, I'm ready. And that's the interesting thing about them. And it can, that's why I'm quite optimistic that they can actually re-stimulate the economy,
Mhm.
and that um, there's going to be some kind of development with that. But as I said, they act very differently. Jupiter is very visible. It's big. And wherever you have Jupiter, it's the tallest mountain, and it's the biggest castle, and it's the largest plane. It's all these uh, things that we can refer to visually. Whereas Pluto speaks about what is under the surface, the type of change and growth that is more emotional.
Yeah.
This is why Pluto actually refers to shadow work. And Pluto says if you want to grow, you have to face what prevents you from growing. Face your insecurities, face your ignorance, face whatever is blocking
Mhm.
the truth to come out. And so, in some ways, as Jupiter is a truth seeker in the upper world, Pluto is a truth seeker in the underworld. And in mythology, they're brothers. So they actually work together. But like I said, Pluto works with the astrologer or with the psychologist, whether Jupiter is the entrepreneur who's going to work with, or the theologian, who's going to look for meaning.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes, like I said, some people born with that are going to be so resourceful, and they're going to be people with tremendous, tremendous power. Like, who's born with that conjunction? Bill Gates, comes to mind. He has that Pluto Jupiter in his second house, all the wealth and massive empire.
Mhm.
But Jupiter Pluto times is also a time when there is a truth on the surface, and there's a truth that is under the surface. And it can be a time when there are inconvenient truths being revealed, when people have to suddenly face a truth that maybe they didn't expect, or maybe it's not comfortable. But the message is it will set you free. Have the courage to see things for what they are. Don't sugarcoat, don't exaggerate, be honest. They're really about very raw honesty.
And I don't always think they're necessarily negative things, because I have certainly seen in my life, in the life of clients, that the truth is you are actually very good at this. Go do that. Right. And
Yeah,
that is sometimes a really big piece of truth to swallow, as much as any other piece of information. But the truth that lives down there in that Plutonian space, he just wants you to see it. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is just the truth. This is it. Now you need to do something with that. And with these two together, especially as we saw them in April, I think many people did get driven. They got focused, and it came from a truthful place, even if there was no pure identification of it quite yet. But as they get ready to come together again at the end of June in retrograde, you get to look back over. And I think we get to all get real honest about that truth. You know, Jupiter and Pluto in retrograde together say, where are you pretending you've got it more together than you do? Where are you pretending you understand that truth? Let's get into that. Let's review that. Let's get that ready. You know, I love it. I'm very excited about that particular coming together here in June because it's good for all of us. It's like, hey, you need more training. That's just the answer.
Absolutely. And that's the empowering message, is that suddenly there's an opportunity. Suddenly you thought you could go, up to 20, and that Pluto Jupiter tells you not 20, it's 200.
Yes.
Just aim for it, just go for it. So there is that. But if you look back at April when they came together, there was also an explosion of conspiracy theories, which is very Pluto Jupiter, because it's a time where you doubt what's true, what's fake, who's telling the truth. And it's that digging,
Mm-hmm.
which of course people had time to do. They were at home and on their computers, so you watch videos. But it's also that aspiration that you can't just take things for granted. You do need to do more research. And what can happen with Pluto Jupiter is that what seems to be glamorous has a dark side.
Mm-hmm.
One of the examples that actually is happened this time was just a few weeks before, end of February, March. There was a big scandal that was exposed in the Kundalini yoga community, where the great teacher Jupiter was revealed to have abused some of his devotees and close associates, and it created a really bad feeling of, it's not a convenient truth. However, let's see why that happened. Let's do the therapy work around it,
Mm-hmm.
and let's not pretend it's all pretty because it's spiritual.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of, like I said, there can be a stain in a place that is otherwise spotless.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
But if you're not afraid to look at those stains, then you can clean them.
Yeah. And if not, you just have a stain that only you're pretending you don't have the stain. Yeah. That's a challenge.
Indeed. So once again, it's going to happen around 23 degrees Capricorn, 22, 23, 24. They go back and forth. Try to see where that is in your chart, and where you bring that projectile to catapult you to the next big you, and that great opportunity that you can experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where is this happening for you?
It's in my seventh house,
Oh,
and relationships and consultations, any kind of interaction with others. And it's interesting to see, during this time, a lot of cooperation work, and meeting people who are tremendously wise, and having projects together, and doing things kind of and on a cooperative level.
so
So it's interesting.
here we are
Looking
then,
forward.
huh?
Sorry, here
And
we
here
are.
we are.
Absolutely. Stormy. I meant the storm.
That's that's right.
Pluto,
Which
Jupiter.
yeah, and this is working through my fifth house and activated my sun beautifully as well. So here we are. I've found everyone. Brilliant. Should we talk about Jupiter, Neptune?
Yes. And let me just quickly, I have the charts to show you, and I forget because I talk too much. So here is Jupiter Saturn in December 21st, 2020, 0 degrees Aquarius, so you can have a visual. And it's interesting, the sun's going to be 0 Capricorn because it's the solstice. Um, so mark your calendar, have a really important ceremony there. Interestingly, that conjunction is going to square the ruler of Aquarius, Uranus in Taurus.
Mm.
So that's another discussion, but it's good to at least notice it.
Yeah, and we've got Juno up there at 0 degrees too.
And this is the current Pluto Jupiter in June, right? June 30th at 24 degrees Capricorn. You see that Saturn is close by. So as I said, the three of them are kind of doing an open marriage here, a threesome. And it's 24 Capricorn. That's also the time soon after the eclipse on the solstice degree, and Mars will just have entered Aries. I believe a day or two before, and Mars is going to stay in Aries for about 6 months because it's going to retrograde. So
Yeah.
many things are happening around that time as well.
And I know Paulus is in there as well, our strategy
Yeah,
maker. She's there
sure.
at 24 degrees. That will be, it's very creative. She's very creative, but a good strategizer.
Well, Pallas is such an interesting asteroid.
Mhm.
She's the daughter of Jupiter, and he loved her. But as you know a bit about the mythology, she was born from his head. And there's something about Pallas that has to do with the intellectual woman, the woman who is not just going to be domesticated or, the lunar feminine. She's more of a mental feminine.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that around that time is probably when Joe Biden is going to announce,
A running.
who his vice president is going to be, and it's likely going to be a woman. So we see women rising in prominence in the Capricorn world of leadership and seizing their opportunity.
Mhm.
I trust this Pallas, Juno, Pluto will be eventful based on that. We may see again important women leading the way forward, new female leadership. And
Sure.
even in Vedic astrology, I spoke with a friend, Theodore Niker. He presented a talk on the new year, and he said that very likely there's going to be a woman really rising in power in the United States. And so, there's no woman who was nominated, but maybe this is going to come as Pallas to the vice presidency.
Mm. Yeah. We'll watch and see, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so the next one is going to be the Jupiter Neptune. And as I said, they rule the sign of Pisces, and they're going to meet in April 22. And it seems far away, but time flies. And they are in the sign of Pisces at 23 Pisces. Now, what's interesting about this chart is that not only are they together in Pisces at 23, but Saturn's going to be 23 Aquarius, the nodes are going to be 23, Taurus, Scorpio, and the sun is going to be 22 and a half, 23, Aries. So there's a lot of echoing of that degree. So what are Jupiter and Neptune? Their cycle is about 13 years, and the previous one was in 2009. Jupiter, Neptune, and Chiron in Aquarius, which was an incredible time. Now, if you remember what was 2009 about, it was the time right after the big economic crash.
Yeah.
And everybody was, again, disillusioned. So what does that have to do with Jupiter and Neptune? Basically, both of these energy, Jupiter and Neptune, are non-material. They take us to the spiritual world, to the other dimension. So some people say, well, people who are Neptunian are living in illusions because they're so idealistic and they don't see the problems. They tend to only see the good things and delude themselves. But the truth is, who is deluding ourselves? Is it not true that we are all one? Is it not true that we all aim for the same things and that there's no real difference between me and you? So what is the truth? From a Jupiter and Neptune point of view, the truth is not only in mechanical science, in what you can see and touch. There's also something that is of a higher dimension, of an all-encompassing meaning. And that's what Jupiter and Neptune are about, is to go beyond what meets the eyes. It's to understand there's a higher meaning to your life. You're not just here to survive. You're not just here to reproduce. So it's not just about eat, have kids, and die. So what is it about? Jupiter and Neptune are about understanding that there is a higher purpose to the reason we're here, both individually as Maurice and Stormie, and both as a collective. And that's the search for meaning. So people who are born with Jupiter and Neptune are people who are seekers, spiritual seekers, and they are never satisfied with, just what's in front of them. They often feel that there's more to life than this. And in a very simple way, they can become very religious. Many priests and rabbis and Buddhist monks, have strong Jupiter Neptune interplays. And also just people who like to go to church, who have strong faith. Why do you have faith? Because you cannot see God, like you can't touch or tell what color it is, but there's a higher presence. And that's Jupiter Neptune. It takes you to a world that is abstract. And that's why, on the one hand, it's a world of magic, but it's also a world that is difficult to navigate, because when you step out of the material world into the world of meaning, it's without boundaries. Both Jupiter and Neptune have no boundaries. It's eternity. It's forever. It's everywhere. It's everyone. It's not limit. There's no limit. There's no quantification. And people who have this symbol can have natural intuitions and tap into higher truth and come up with tremendous spiritual wisdom. But the shadow side is that they can exaggerate and beautify. And the two sides of the coins is that you have, again, the truth seekers and the liars.
Sure.
Now, quite often, the liars don't know they're lying. They just believe in their own movies. It's different to be lying, to purposefully deceive people. It's another signature. But here, when you have Jupiter and Neptune, you want the world to be amazing. You want everything to be a great promise. There's some glamour to it. The reason is that there's something deep, deep, deep inside of you that knows that there is a divine essence in our life. And some people don't have the tools to say that, and so they end up making up stories. But it comes deep down from a genuine need to understand there's more to life than just paying the bills. Now, what happens if it's mismanaged? You can have a bubble burst. And that's what happened in 2009 and 2008, as it was leading to that, was that you had this excess of trust, and people believed in, the mortgage and the real estate and the loans, and everything was getting out of hand. And then Jupiter, Neptune basically generated this great deception. And the message of Jupiter Neptune is true spiritual realization is not in trying to make everything beautiful and fancy. So it's actually about simplifying. When you see people born with Jupiter and Neptune, as big as these planets are and as boundless as they are, you often have people who are not interested in material life or in, physical possessions. So they can lead very simple lives closer to nature, or at least a strong connection to the wild, because the wild is so open. So there is a strong return to nature, to simplicity, to the original design before we complicated our lives with so many gadgets and 5Gs and whatnot. Jupiter Neptune says, just strip the layers, connect with the divine. So if people are tuning into that, they will open their heart. We spoke about Sun Venus being the heart center, but here it's a divine love. It's not human love. It's something of a much higher frequency. And if we are tuning into that, it's a force of compassion, and it's a force of realization and unification and truth. But if we're not, then what you have with Jupiter Neptune is deception or a loss of control. Now, if it's in the sign of Pisces, we can look at best case scenario and worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is floods.
Yeah.
Out of control no boundaries, overflowing. And that can lead to nature causing all kinds of devastations. It can also lead to spiritual downfalls,
Yeah.
what we call false prophets, people who know how to speak, but they don't have the right intention.
Sure.
But in a positive way, we can have true prophets and messengers of truth, and people who will unite, who will basically bring the in a very Piscean way, remind us of who we really are and where we really come from. So it's going to be a fascinating time. And once again, I would recommend go back to 2009, try to see what happened to you around that time. Was there a realization? Did you meet a new teacher? Did you start some kind of spiritual journey? You know, try to compare notes and see how it works for you.
Yes. When I'm thinking about this, I'm just laying out the chart of the United States gently in my head and wondering how this plays out for us, especially um, looking at the square between the nodes. That's the thing I was continuing to kind of evaluate um, over here and how this.
Where is the US Neptune?
Ah, I can't remember. I was trying to.
22, 22 Virgo.
It's 20. Okay. Okay.
It's right opposing that.
Mm,
So the United States is not only having a Pluto return
yeah.
that year, it's having a Neptune opposition that year. So it is a big deal.
So it is a big deal. Hmm. We'll have to talk about that chart next time. I got to see that a little bit more in depth, but I'm fascinated with looking at how the aspects will impact the United States, of course. I mean, I live here. So I'm looking to see if we have any questions down below. So far, people are talking about children being born in 2009. I know that I started a spiritual path in 2009. So that was interesting too.
I mean, it's not surprising.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I
I
mean,
mean,
it's interesting though.
it's a year for me. It's a year when I decided to move to the islands. I was living in Colorado and I moved to Hawaii the year after. But that's when I made the decision. And it was a very empowering and very spiritual experience to move to the island. And it's also the year in 2009 where I published the second book. So it was also some kind of, you know, download of sorts.
Yeah, I can remember in 2009, I started this spiritual path, and it was the essence of being set on a different path. It was completely, there was an inner reworking that had come into my consciousness. Um, and then I made the decision to seek the information that had been provided. And I think that's the interesting part is the decision to seek what we're shown.
And it is an amazing journey when suddenly you realize that your life can be so rich
Mm,
because you were worried about the practical matters. You were worried about, some of the economic crisis. And it's important. You do need to pay attention to your survival. But then Jupiter Neptune says, hey, remember what really matters. Remember why you're here. Like
mm,
they take you away from the details to the big picture perspective.
yeah.
And you suddenly see, oh my God, That's what it's about. That's why it happened that way.
Yeah.
You start realizing why things happen the way they do.
Hmm. Which is interesting because I don't know if you've seen this in your experience, but is this a placement where, as the awakening per se is happening away from the material world, have you seen people go into this or come out of this feeling more like they were the victim, like worse off than before? Because I know that on this side, that place of just an unwillingness, an inability, whatever the correct word is at that time, to accept what's being revealed seems to complicate. And that is a great place to escape.
Oh, of course. No, I agree that it can be, um, it's part of the lies. It's part of um, the delusion. Um, in worst case scenario, Jupiter and Neptune can lead even to mental health issues
Sure.
because you lose touch. You kind of are in this abstract world. There's nothing to hold you. And if you don't have some maturity to navigate that, you don't, you can, know left from right anymore. So there can be a victim mentality, and there can also be, you know, a messiah complex.
Mm.
God told me that you shouldn't be here. And so you're going to use that Jupiter Neptune as if God tells you, who's to argue, right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
So you kind of take authority on spiritual matters, when in fact the message of Jupiter and Neptune is that you cannot own the truth. You cannot own spirituality, just the same way you cannot own air and you cannot own the sun
Mhm.
yet. And the same way you can't say, God is my thing and I'm the one who's got the real answers. And then you start to mix ego with spirituality and
Sure.
it becomes a mess.
Yeah. Mm. And so someone is asking about the Jupiter Neptune opposition, which we don't see that until
Well,
20.
the cycle is 13 years, so the opposition is about every seven, after 7 years after the conjunction. Interestingly, I mean, the opposition is just another activation of these principles,
Mhm.
right? And it happened in 2000, was it 2016?
15, 16, 16,
16.
right there.
It was when many, many show business stars died.
Mm.
Neptune was in Pisces on the nodes, and Jupiter was in Virgo. Um, right. And then Saturn was squaring in Sag. And, speaking about show business, it's interesting that I'm going to give you a Jupiter Neptune example. And those of you who want to read more about that, go to my website under articles, and you'll see an article on Jupiter Neptune and the fact that three of the biggest superstars were born in the summer of 1958 under the conjunction of Jupiter Neptune on the North Node.
Mm.
Michael Jackson, Prince, and Madonna. They're all born in the same summer of 58 with that same configuration. Now, what's interesting, why, they became myths. They became so big. And when did they become big? Track the Jupiter Neptune cycle. 1983, both, Michael Jackson released Thriller and Prince released Purple Rain and Madonna released Like a Virgin, like all their biggest inceptive albums that made them mega stars. And so that's part of the Jupiter Neptune, is like it's boundless. It's not just a popular star, it's larger than life. So it's not just on a spiritual level, it can also be something magical, on an entertaining level. And they bring the magic in that sense through music, through um, all kinds of fantasies.
Sure.
But the interesting thing is that Michael Jackson died when? In June 2009, when they met again. So he was born under this cycle and he transitioned on this cycle. And Prince the same. He died in 2016 during the opposition. So, yeah, I mean, the opposition is just a need to balance between the two forces. And if you think about Jupiter being fire, Sagittarius, and Neptune being the water, how do you reconcile with both? But it's another discussion. It's just going to take another 3 hours to get into that.
Just another 3 hours. That'll be fine. No.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for covering all of this with us. And I think we answered all of the questions that we'll be able to answer today without truly having other talks. And as far as I know, there are some questions down here about Jupiter and Neptune in different houses. You can definitely check out Maurice's work. And on my channel, there are videos talking about each of those placements as well. So feel free to check those out.
And, there's a whole book on Neptune that I really recommend, not just because I wrote it, but because it brings all these principles in a more organized fashion. So check it out. That and the Astrology and the Evolution of Consciousness, Volume 1. It's another book I recommend.
And can we just find the book on your website, or is it on Amazon, or how do we get this?
Yeah, it's on my website, books, and it's on Amazon. Just Google Maurice Fernandez. You'll see different offerings.
Okay. Well, it will all be in the description box down below this video, you guys, after it uploads and allows me to make any changes. And if you would like to spend time, know more about Maurice, or have questions for him, all of that will be down there as well. So Maurice, hopefully sometime I get to have you back, especially since you've got a busy 7th house this year. I'd love to have you, but thank you again for joining us today.
All the best to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes. All right. Bye, everybody. We will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone.